Something just happened in Tokyo that almost nobody outside of Asia noticed. And the people who did notice it, the analysts, the economists, the military strategists, are calling it the most significant strategic miscalculation the West has made in decades. While the entire world has been watching China, while every headline has been focused on Beijing's rise, Japan has been executing a transformation so fundamental, so comprehensive, and so carefully calculated that by the time most people realize what's happening, it will be too late to respond. Everyone is counting Japan out. The aging population, the stagnant economy, the pacifist constitution, the lost decades. Every narrative you've heard about Japan for the last 30 years has told you the same story. This is a nation in decline. This is a power that peaked in the 1980s and has been fading ever since. And that narrative is about to cost the people who believed it more than they can afford to pay. Stay with me, because what you're about to see is not just a story about one country. It's a case study in how the world misreads power, how assumptions become anchors, and how the most dangerous competitors are the ones everyone has stopped watching. Here's what we know. On March 15, 2026, Japan's Ministry of Defense announced the completion of what they called a routine upgrade to their Aegis destroyer fleet. Routine. That was the word they used in the press release. And most outlets that covered it at all buried it on page 7. But the technical specifications tell a very different story. Japan has just integrated hypersonic interceptor capability into every major surface combatant in the Maritime Self-Defense Force. Not experimental, not prototype, full operational deployment across the entire fleet. The same week, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries quietly delivered the first production units of what they're calling the Type 12 surface-to-ship missile, extended range variant. The official range is listed as 900 kilometers. Independent analysts who've looked at the propulsion system and fuel capacity believe the real number is closer to 1,500 kilometers. That's not a coastal defense weapon. That's a sea control system that can hold every major shipping lane in the Western Pacific at risk from Japanese territory. And it gets more interesting. Buried in the 2026 defense budget is funding for what the document describes as autonomous maritime domain awareness systems. The translation of that bureaucratic language is this. Japan is deploying a network of AI-controlled underwater sensors, surface drones, and satellite monitoring that will give them real-time tracking of every military and commercial vessel moving through the East China Sea, the Philippine Sea, and the approaches to the Strait of Malacca. The network is scheduled to reach initial operational capability in 8 months. And here's the part that should make every strategic planner in Washington and Beijing sit up and pay attention. Japan didn't ask for permission. They didn't consult with allies. They didn't float trial balloons in diplomatic channels to see how partners would react. They just built it, quietly, methodically, and by the time anyone noticed, the infrastructure was already in place. That is not the behavior of a declining power. That is not the action of a nation resigned to irrelevance. That is the strategic positioning of a country that has decided the rules are changing and intends to write the new ones. Now let's zoom out, because the military dimension is only one piece of this, and honestly, it's not even the most important piece. The most important piece is what Japan has been doing in the economic and technological sphere while everyone was obsessing over Chinese competition. Start with semiconductors. The United States and Europe spent the last 5 years panicking about semiconductor supply chain dependence on Taiwan and building massive subsidy programs to reshore chip manufacturing. Tens of billions of dollars, political capital, diplomatic pressure, all focused on reducing reliance on TSMC, and while that entire drama was playing out, Japan quietly became the world's dominant supplier of semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Not the chips themselves, the machines that make the chips, the lithography systems, the etching tools, the deposition equipment, the metrology instruments. Tokyo Electron, Canon, Nikon, Sumco. If you want to build a cutting-edge semiconductor fab anywhere in the world, you are buying Japanese equipment. And here's what that means strategically. China is trying to build domestic semiconductor capability to escape Western sanctions. Every advanced chip fabrication facility China is constructing requires Japanese equipment. The United States is trying to reshore semiconductor manufacturing to reduce dependence on Asia. Every new American fab requires Japanese equipment. Europe's chip ambitions, same story. Japan is not competing in the semiconductor race. Japan owns the infrastructure that makes the race possible, and they did it so quietly that most people don't even realize it happened. Now add rare earth elements to the equation. Everyone knows China dominates rare earth mining and processing. What most people don't know is that Japan has spent the last decade developing the world's most advanced rare earth recycling technology and building stockpiles that would make any strategic planner jealous. Japan currently holds enough rare earth reserves to supply their domestic industry for 20 years at current consumption rates. And they're not just holding static inventory. They've built a circular economy system that recovers rare earths from electronic waste at efficiency rates that China's mining operations can't match economically. Which means that in any scenario where rare earth supply becomes a geopolitical weapon, Japan can outlast almost anyone. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Japan hasn't just been building strategic independence. They've been building strategic partnerships that reshape the entire geometry of power in Asia. Look at what happened with India over the last 18 months. Japan and India signed what they're calling an economic partnership agreement. The official announcement focused on tariff reductions and market access. The actual substance of the deal is far more significant. Japan is financing and building 3 major industrial corridors across India. High-speed rail, deep-water ports, smart manufacturing zones, the infrastructure that will turn India into a genuine manufacturing alternative to China. And the financing terms are extraordinary. Low interest rates, long repayment periods. Technology transfer agreements that put Japanese manufacturing expertise directly into Indian factories. This is not a commercial transaction. This is a strategic investment in creating a counterweight to Chinese manufacturing dominance. Now look at Southeast Asia. Japan is the largest foreign investor in Vietnam, the largest infrastructure financier in Indonesia, the largest technology partner in Thailand. China has been spending enormous sums on Belt and Road projects across the region with debt burdens that countries are now struggling to service. Japan's approach has been different. Smaller projects, less publicity, but every single one focused on building productive capacity rather than symbolic infrastructure. Factories instead of stadiums. Ports that generate revenue instead of monuments that require maintenance. Here's the thing that most analysts are missing. China spent the last 2 decades trying to use economic leverage to build geopolitical influence. Japan is using geopolitical strategy to build economic integration. And the second approach is far more durable, because economic dependency can be weaponized, which creates resentment and pushes countries to diversify. Economic partnership that increases prosperity creates alignment that's much harder to break. Now let's talk demographics, because this is where everyone gets Japan wrong. Yes, Japan has an aging population. Every article about Japan written in the last 20 years has treated this as a fatal weakness. Here's what those articles missed. Japan has been preparing for this demographic reality for 30 years, and rather than treating it as a crisis to be solved, they've treated it as a constraint to be engineered around. Japan has the world's highest robot density per manufacturing worker. They've been automating everything that can be automated to compensate for labor scarcity. The result is that Japanese manufacturing productivity per worker is among the highest in the world. The demographic challenge that everyone assumes will cripple Japan's economy has instead forced Japan to become the global leader in exactly the technologies that every other aging society is going to need in the next 20 years. Automation, robotics, AI-assisted healthcare, elder care technology. Every developed country on Earth is heading toward the same demographic structure Japan already has. And Japan has a 30-year head start in building the systems to manage it. That's not a weakness. That's a soon-to-be export industry worth trillions. Now, let's talk military, because this is where the transformation is most visible if you know where to look. Article 9 of Japan's constitution, the Pacifist Clause, imposed by the United States after World War II, has been the defining constraint on Japanese military policy for 75 years. Everyone assumed it was permanent. Japan hasn't formally amended Article 9. What they've done is reinterpret it so expansively that the constraint is now effectively meaningless. The Japanese self-defense forces are now authorized to engage in collective self-defense, meaning they can fight alongside allies even when Japan itself is not directly attacked. They can deploy offensive weapons previously prohibited. They can conduct operations beyond Japanese territory. And the buildup that's now happening is extraordinary. Japan's 2026 defense budget is the largest in Japanese history, not adjusted for inflation. Absolute terms. They're building 2 new Aegis destroyers per year. They're acquiring long-range strike capability. They're expanding their submarine fleet. They're developing indigenous 5th-generation fighter aircraft in partnership with the UK and Italy. And here's the crucial detail. All of this is happening with broad public support. Polling shows that over 60% of Japanese citizens now support increased defense spending. The political constraint that everyone assumed would prevent Japanese rearmament has evaporated. China's behavior has scared Japan in ways that no amount of American encouragement ever could. Every aggressive move China has made in the last 10 years has pushed Japanese public opinion toward rearmament faster than any government propaganda could have. And here's where the American angle gets really interesting. The United States has spent 75 years treating Japan as a subordinate partner. That relationship is changing. Japan is no longer asking Washington for permission to pursue its strategic interests. They're informing Washington of decisions already made. The Aegis upgrade, done. The long-range missiles, deployed. The AI surveillance network, operational. American officials are being presented with fait accompli and discovering that the alliance structure they thought they controlled has become a relationship between genuine equals. Now here's the global reframe that almost nobody is discussing. Everyone talks about the US-China competition as if it's a bilateral dynamic. Two superpowers, one established, one rising. That framework is incomplete because it ignores the reality that the most strategically capable actor in Asia might not be either of them. Japan has the world's third largest economy. They have the most advanced technology base in multiple critical sectors. They have alliance relationships across Asia that are based on mutual benefit rather than coercion. They have manufacturing infrastructure that's irreplaceable in the short to medium term. And most importantly, they have a political system that's stable, predictable, and capable of long-term strategic planning. China has size. America has legacy dominance. Japan has precision. In a complex system, precision often beats size. The mistake everyone is making is assuming that national power in 2026 works the same way it worked in 1986. It doesn't. The country that controls the choke points wins. The country that owns the irreplaceable infrastructure wins. The country that can build coalitions without coercion wins. Japan is quietly positioning itself to be that country, and by the time the rest of the world realizes what's happened, the architecture will already be built. If you're a semiconductor company, you're negotiating with Tokyo whether you realize it or not. If you're a Southeast Asian government planning infrastructure, Japan is offering the best terms. If you're an investor looking at Asian markets, Japan offers stability that China can't match and growth potential that's being systematically underpriced. The narrative that Japan is a spent force, a nation in managed decline, a power that peaked 40 years ago, that narrative is not just wrong. It's creating a mispricing of Japanese strategic value so severe that the correction is going to be painful for everyone who positioned themselves on the wrong side of it. Everyone is counting Japan out, and everyone who believes that conventional wisdom is about to pay for it, because Japan is not resurgent. Japan never declined. They adapted, quietly, methodically, without the drama and publicity that everyone associates with power projection. And now the adaptation is complete. The infrastructure is built, the partnerships are locked in, the technology lead is insurmountable in key sectors. The military capability is operational, the pieces are in place. The biggest strategic shifts are the ones that happen while everyone is looking somewhere else, and this one has been happening for 20 years,